question is directed at George. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that the names that you mentioned during your presentation did die directly as a result of their using steroids. During alcohol prohibition, people drank alcohol that was wood alcohol. They drank alcohol that was gin that was distilled in bathtubs. Toxic, nasty, nasty stuff. The reason they drank is because safer, cheaper, better alternatives weren't available at the time. Once prohibition ended, nobody drinks bathtub gin anymore. Nobody drinks wood alcohol anymore. Assuming that all these deaths were tied to steroids, all these deaths occurred during a period where steroids were illegal and were still prohibited. So they were prohibited this entire time. People were doing them anyway. Why not lift that veil, let people who are going to do it anyway get steroids from a doctor, get steroids from more reputable distributors so they don't have to go to Tijuana. And maybe it wasn't steroids themselves that killed them. Maybe it was the fact that it was some black market steroids, that they weren't being advised by a reputable doctor.
You're absolutely correct that maybe, if they were controlled better, maybe Lyle Alzado wouldn't have died. Maybe Ken Caminetti, who got most of his from Tijuana, wouldn't have died. But what about the tight end that I talked to a couple of weeks ago, admitted that he gained 60 pounds. This guy's only 38 years old. Gained 60 pounds, beat up his wife. Went to his coach and said, "Coach, help me. I'm doing the juice, but God, I beat up so-and-so." I know these people. He didn't get his from Mexico. Now, I don't know where he got them. But if you allow one, if Bob can do steroids, if we're playing side by side, he hits 230, I hit 230, we both want to move up to the next level. If he's allowed to do juice, when I think back to sitting on the bench at St. Louis, I'd have done juice. So whether it's legal or illegal is immaterial. If we make it legal, the problem's going to only become worse. In relationship to alcohol, I don't happen to drink. So I'm not a good one to discuss it with.
I guess my point is, if we're talking about the safety of the athletes, isn't it better to have this all happening above ground and in the open air?
No, it's better to have it. If you use it, you're out of baseball. It should be a very strong penalty. Nothing like Pete Rose. One thing about that, Dick made the point earlier and Dale followed up, they know that if you gamble, you're dead. So that's the way it should be with steroids, unless doctor says, you know what, I'm going to go to the commissioner and say, Dale needs to have this so he'll be able to come back. Then I accept that.
Dr. Fost, you mentioned the increased intensity of workouts of those on steroids. Would you consider that roid rage?
Roid rage, as I understand it, refers to people who do criminal things, that is, who assault people or...
Okay, but is roid rage, quote unquote, without getting into the technicalities of what roid rage means, isn't that one of the side effects of taking anabolic steroids?
You become more aggressive when you take steroids, and that is one part of why I think some athletes feel they can work out harder. They sort of get more aggressive.
So is it psychological, or is it a brain chemistry thing? It's totally psychological.
I think there is a psychological effect that impels them to train harder.
So when you increase the testosterone and you increase your intensity, isn't that is an effect? You're saying that it will affect you that way.
Sure.
And also, are you saying that HGH, the only thing it does is help you heal faster?
No, it has.
Do you think these guys? In other words, do you think guys took HGH for other reasons other than healing faster?
Well, they took it so they could get back on the field sooner, could bodybuild better, could lift weights, could train more vigorously, all of which enhance their muscle mass. That's the ultimate goal, is to become stronger.
Decreases fat and increases muscle mass.
Right.
So the ability to recover faster and work out harder and gain muscle mass, steroids does help muscle mass productivity.
Combined with working out. Yeah.
And if I don't want to do that, are you saying in the future, if the motion is accepted, that essentially I am at a tremendously unfair advantage if I decide that I do not want to take this stuff?
I don't know about tremendously unfair. I think
I would say tremendously unfair.
Well, I don't. Well,
I don't think we can look at numbers. We can look at performances.
Dale, you're Exhibit A. I mean, I'm assuming you didn't use any of these drugs, and you're an all-star and one of the great players.
Well, then doesn't that make my point?
You didn't seem to be at very much of a disadvantage.
But doesn't that make my point that we don't need them?
There's all sorts of reasons.
Why do we need them if people are able to perform at the highest level without them? and that it also provides a huge advantage if you use them, but you can still be a world-class athlete. Why would we need them? Why not ban them and change the culture to the point to where guys think a long time before they take this stuff? Why do we need them?
No, we don't need them, and we don't need sports either. We don't need tackle in football. We can play two-hand touch.
Yeah, but
it's
we're not
just not
talking
of much
about
interest.
we're not talking about football and the people that die, and that's not the argument.
Yeah.
The argument isn't the inherent risks of any sport tonight. It's performance-enhancing drugs. You don't need them to be a world-class athlete. You do not need them, and if you don't take them, you're at a huge advantage. And so I cannot understand. And wouldn't you agree? One last question. That the example that the young people see, wouldn't you say that abuse of these kind of drugs is particularly, we talk about side effects, but wouldn't you agree that it's particularly harmful to young people, that we may not even know abuse of these kind of drugs,
Again,
what may happen?
Let me slightly redirect it. Would you agree, Dr. Fost, with superior medical knowledge, would you agree that there are risks for adolescents that are not present, at least to the same degree, and you might argue at all, for adults?
Absolutely, and I said in my remarks that I thought they should be banned in children. There should be testing in children. There ought to be harsh penalties for suppliers.
If that's the case, then, isn't it inevitable, if you were to allow unfettered access to performance-enhancing drugs beyond a certain threshold of competition and a certain age limit, that those who aspire to play at the collegiate level and ultimately to play at the professional level wouldn't just be influenced, they'd be nearly compelled to begin using sooner than you would advocate?
No.
To get there.
I don't think so. First of all, they wouldn't be able to get them through prescribed channels. They wouldn't be able to get them through illegal channels.
Plenty of people get them now.
And that's why we need rigorous testing and criminal penalties for those who do it. Look, it's interesting how we obsess about this issue, which, again, has caused very little serious harm to adolescents. And the ones who do use them, as Julian said, are using them mainly to bodybuild. They're not being used, for the most part, in the competitive sports. Most of the adolescent use is in the gyms, not in the playing field. But listen, alcohol kills 50,000 people a year, and what are the big leagues doing about that? When players drink, I don't hear anybody talking about lifetime bans for drunk driving by baseball players. That kills 50,000 people a year, including innocent victims, and including a lot of kids. And here we are talking about something that kills almost nobody. Chewing tobacco is a big problem among youth in this country, and we have the networks showing Terry Francona drooling every 10 seconds during the World Series.
Although they have banned it in the minors, and they would ban it at the major league level if they could unilaterally impose it.
And most seriously of all is the violence by professional athletes. I'm talking about sexual assault and criminal violence rampant in professional sports. No lifetime penalties, no ban, do a little community service, and come back. What message does that send to kids?
Isn't that why, to the side of the table that is against the motion, isn't that why the argument against the use of performance-enhancing drugs is best focused on competitive issues, the sanctity of the records, the level playing field argument, and if we start moralizing about health dangers or relative impact on society, then you run up against all the arguments that Dr. Fost just laid out, and isn't the best argument for this side of the table the argument about competitive balance or competitive fairness?
True, but Doctor, remember what Dr. James Andrews said. That is, we have more torn muscles, we have more pulled muscles, because we have too much muscle mass for the body. And that's the direct result of steroids and the workouts with steroids.
Very briefly.
That's the best man.
All right. I find, one of the things here, a lot of these things are like the guy who's pulled over on the highway by the policeman saying, but officer, why are you stopping me? There were all kinds of people going faster than I was. But to deal with the young people, I mean, you're familiar with the state-imposed doping programs in East Germany and some of those things, and the medical data arising from that. Clearly, there are health impacts, adverse health impacts on the athletes.
Those were horrible, and that was close to coercion. And as I said, the side effects in kids are sufficient to have very rigorous penalties against those who do that sort of thing.